Good evening, and welcome to a virtual town hall hosted by your 30th District legislators. Tonight, you will be seeing and hearing from Senator Claire Wilson and Representatives Jamila Taylor and Jesse Johnson. As you may know, some of you have submitted questions in advance, and I will read those questions to the lawmakers. You may also submit your question live via the chat box, so please submit your questions now and we'll try to answer as many as we can. First, I'd like to open the floor up to our lawmakers for some brief opening remarks. And first, we'll hear from Senator Claire Wilson, who is a former educator and administrator with the Puget Sound Educational Services District and currently serves as the Assistant Majority Whip for the Senate Democrats. She also serves as Vice Chair of the Early Learning and K through 12 Education Committee. Senator Wilson.
Thanks so much, Travis, and I'm so happy to be here with my partners from the 30th Legislative District, Representative Taylor and Representative Johnson, and looking forward to the conversation tonight to share with you questions you might have about what the outcome of this historic session was for folks across Washington State, as well as some specific questions around the impacts it has for individuals that live within the 30th Legislative District. So I look forward to having time to answer and to find out what's on your mind, and look forward to having the conversation with my colleagues.
Thank you. Next, I'll ask Representative Jesse Johnson to share a few words. Rep. Johnson is an educator and lifelong Federal Way resident, as well as a former City Council member. He currently serves as Vice Chair of the Public Safety Committee and is a member of the Appropriations Committee, where he works with other representatives to approve programs and funding requests in the state operating budget. Rep. Johnson.
Hello, everyone. It's my honor to serve this district where I grew up and have served on the City Council and as an educator. Looking forward to our discussion today, and just wanted to remind our viewers, if you have any questions we aren't able to address, please reach out to myself or my colleagues to connect. I'm really excited to talk about all of the important work we accomplished and the work moving forward. Thank you.
Thank you. Next, we have Representative Jamila Taylor. Representative Taylor is an attorney, youth advocate, and small business owner. She serves as chair of the legislature's Black Members Caucus and is vice chair of the Housing, Human Services, and Veterans Committee, and is a member of the Community and Economic Development and Transportation Committees. Rep. Taylor.
Thank you so much. I really appreciate being here as the newest lawmaker on the 30th Legislative District team. It is an amazing time to be a lawmaker amongst these powerhouses of Rep. Johnson and Senator Wilson. The historic legislation that they both worked on, and they've set such high standards for me to be a part of, and I am so honored to serve with them and to serve the 30th district and bring the kind of resources that we need in our region. And this year, with the priorities that we set in the legislature with the COVID response, racial equity, environmental justice, and of course, the economic recovery, our legislative team worked really well together to bring the resources home, And so we're looking forward to making sure that not only is the 30th district served well, but those who are similarly situated are also served throughout the state. So looking forward to the conversation tonight and looking forward to connecting throughout the year.
Thank you. Now we'll begin taking questions. We have quite a few questions submitted ahead of time, and we are taking questions live. So if you have a question, please type it in the chat now. Our first question is one that came in over email. This question is, I'm looking for the name here. Oh, okay. So this is a question from Jan. Jan asks, I heard the eviction moratorium ends this month. I'm working slowly on paying my back rent, but have not caught up. Does that mean I'll be evicted? Representative Taylor, would you like to take this question?
you. Of course. Yes, the eviction moratorium is scheduled to end on June 30th, but we know that the governor could extend that because we're still in transition around the resources that have been brought to Washington State. Over $1 billion in rental assistance is coming into the state. And clearly, we're going to need some more time to get it out into the communities and ensure that we are keeping folks housed. And so that takes time. So while if the eviction moratorium is lifted, we also have a process by which landlords and tenants can request assistance on negotiating the back rent. And so what we want to make sure is, again, people are housed and that they're not facing eviction for this crisis that no one expected, no one was prepared for. And we have the resources now to get it on the ground. And if we work together, I know we're going to have some glitches, but we're going to need your feedback and rapid response to ensure that we keep you in your housing.
Thank you. Our next question is from Sarah. Sarah asks, how are you addressing the childcare crisis in our state? It's the foundation to reopening our economy. What are you willing to do to ensure working parents have a safe and high quality place for their children to learn and play while they are at work when the COVID-19 crisis is over? And Senator Wilson, I have a feeling that you have done some work in this area.
Well, I cannot tell you how happy I am and how proud I am to be able to answer this question. And as a matter of fact, this session, we passed the Fair Start for Kids Act, which is a historic investment and landmark investment and legislation for childcare, for early learning, and also for school age care, because again, we knew and we found out, if we didn't know during the pandemic, that for families, school was the care setting for children. And when schools closed and children were at home and families couldn't go to work because they didn't have a place for their children to be, I believe the critical issue became even more urgent. And there was a much larger group of individuals who understood the struggle and the challenges that so many Washingtonians and people frankly across the US have had. And also now we're touched by it in ways they've never been touched before. So we were able to really look at childcare and care for children as the economic recovery strategy. So within that, we stabilized and expanded the childcare industry, and were able to increase rates that we were paying providers. We're able to make childcare more affordable by reducing the payment that parents have to pay. And you may have heard about the copay cliff, where so many families could not take a wage increase or had to leave a job because the payment they had for childcare sometimes doubled and tripled. We also were able to make childcare and early learning more accessible by increasing eligibility for many families over time, and also provide resources and money for family, friends, and neighbors, because not all families choose to have their children in a childcare setting or choose to have their children in family childcare, but perhaps have someone at home that they would like to be able to watch and care for their children, but need support in order for that to happen. And then the last thing, but the most important, I believe, is also strengthening the prevention and intervention services that are available for mental health consulting, for home visiting, dual language, language access, trauma-informed care, things that we know are so important for every family, because no longer is childcare a poverty issue. Childcare is an issue of economic recovery for all. So I will stop there. I could go on for days. And again, please feel free to reach out. What I will say is these changes are coming July 1. So the one thing we did do was make sure that the impact was immediate as it could be for not only families and children, but also for the providers and the small business owners that are caring for those most precious possessions, our children.
Thank you. We are going to go on to another question that was emailed in. And then after that, we have a question from Maria. So Maria, your question will be asked after this one. The question that was sent in is from Ray. Ray says, we need more trade schools. Not all jobs need a degree. Portland has done very well in the past in regards to the trade schools. What can be done to increase interest in trades? And Representative Johnson, I think I'll ask you to start off on this one.
I really appreciate that question, Ray. As someone that apprenticed at my dad's local general contracting company in Federal Way when I grew up, I definitely understand how important it is to expose our students to different career pathways. One of the things that I did last year was partner with the county to do a community map of where trade schools were located. And what we found was the nearest one that provided opportunities in the general contracting trades was at South Seattle College, the Georgetown campus. And obviously that's a huge barrier for our young people in Federal Way and throughout the 30th. And so we looked at what we could do to bring some of those programs more to South King County. And I'm very excited to partner with the county as well as with the governor's Career Connect Washington initiative. And we were able to get a total of $750,000 to launch a pre-apprenticeship program in Federal Way Public Schools. And our goal is to really help lay the groundwork to first engage and then hopefully inspire and prepare our students to do hands-on educational learning in building and construction trades. But also what we want to do is help our students earn credit while they're doing so. And so this partnership will also be with Green River College. And so students, it's sort of like running start for the trades. Students will be able to get their high school diploma and their junior and senior years, as well as an apprenticeship diploma or certification at Green River College. And this will prepare our students for high earning jobs in construction, painting, electrical, and so on. And also, as we know, throughout our community, we're seeing light rail come, we're seeing Sound Transit, Department of Transportation, and labor unions are throughout our district right now because of the expansion of transportation. And so this will connect them on the site. Aside from their learning, they will get to go on the jobs and have a mentor on the job. And so there's a mentorship component with a local labor union and community-based provider that will help them complete the program, hopefully graduate and enter a trade right away. So I'm just super excited about the partnership. Again, I got to thank working with King County, working with the governor's office, working with Career Connect Washington to get this to Federal Way. I'm just excited to see it launch next fall.
Thank you so much. Our next question comes from Maria on YouTube. Maria asks, if coronavirus cases keep going up and up, what are you going to do to try to help? And I think Maria actually might be part of El Centro de la Raza. Senator Wilson, I know that you have some thoughts on the direction of the pandemic and what we need to do to be safe and get out of this. Would you like to start?
Well, you know, I think all these things are public health issues, and I think it's important that we know our communities and that we go to where our communities are. So the first thing I would want to make sure of is really how it is that we are not expecting communities to come find us, if you will, as we think about vaccines and vaccinations and sites, but how are we using our resources locally to go out into communities where individuals congregate, where families are, whether it's in neighborhoods, to make sure that we are reaching out to people as opposed to expecting people to reach out to us. The governor today, I know, did some motivation and incentives in partnership with the Washington State Lottery in the fact that they are If you have had your first vaccine and individuals need to do nothing to apply, they just have to have had at least their first vaccine. And the hope is things like $250,000 or $1 million or free college tuition for a year might incentivize individuals. But I also know when we think about our community, this community, we have to think about language access. We have to think about being culturally respectful and culturally responsive and making sure that what we're doing, how we're doing it, and where we're doing it is in a place and places that are safe for our communities to come, and where they feel like, again, they're part of a larger community. So I know El Centro has been part of pop-up clinics and really getting the word out, because language access is important. And I think our community needs to continue to come together and figure out ways that we continue to reach out with public health and with the city and with our local partners. And then the other thing I'll say is children in schools go together, and schools and families go together. And we also have a new student health clinic and at Taffet's Holly, and we'll have another student-based health clinic up in the north end of the district. And I'm hoping with additional access to those kinds of things within our community, we'll find families having greater access to medical, dental, and other kinds of services that they need.
I just want to add on top of that, all three of us are very much connected to community leaders in the 30th District and continue to meet new leaders as they are doing the important work of serving folks who are not always served by the mainstream organizations. I mean, for example, Joseph Saya with the Pacific Islander Community Association has not only vaccinated a lot of Pacific Islanders and other community members, not only in the 30th District, but throughout the state. So the kind of work that they're doing in a culturally responsive way to help educate and help reduce the hesitancy is so critical. Lenny Idahosa with Federal Way Black Collective, and of course, Multi-Service Center. So we're trying to address this from multiple angles, not just the traditional hospital setting where you go into a clinic, but finding ways to bring the resources to the community, helping the community have access to us. We're not the kind of legislators who don't pick up our phone. It may take a long time to get meetings with us, but we certainly try to host quarterly meetings with community leaders, and we welcome folks to participate in that process. And also we provide updates to local elected leaders, like the municipal leaders from Milton, Pacific, Algona, and of course, Federal Way. So you think about the mayors and the city council folks. We want to make sure that as many people are aware and then spread the word, because when we're doing this together, we certainly can solve this problem.
Thank you. We have a question that was just submitted, and I'll remind everyone that if you're watching now and you have a question, please go ahead and type it in the chat. This question is from Jacqueline, and Jacqueline asks, for the economic recovery of impacted communities, such as Latinx, what are your plans? And I think that there's some information that might be helpful in our budget and policies that were passed there. Would anyone like to start off and talk about any of the economic recovery efforts that were made this year?
I'd be happy to lead off on that. I think, one of the things that we noticed this year was obviously everyone was impacted, right? But some communities were impacted more than others. And, I have to say the Latinx population is one of the fastest growing in our district. And one things that we did do this year was look at small business recovery. And so we partnered with the Department of Commerce to provide COVID-19 relief tax exemption for small businesses, and also for the landlords that own those businesses. We were very decisive and collaborative and acted with a sense of urgency when we passed, actually, I think that was week 1 for the Washington Recovery Act to help our small businesses. And we know that In our district, small restaurants and neighborhood businesses are the large majority of our local economy. So if they fail, then we all fail. And so that was very important to us. I will say though, in both the federal funding and the state funding that was distributed out and the resources that were allocated, there were challenges. We saw a lot of businesses have difficulties with their applications for grants. We saw profound technological challenges. And so one thing that I am looking at this year in the interim, and I would love to partner with whoever asked the question, is how do we have or design small business incubators where we can train our small businesses to be able to apply for this funding in a better way. And also on the system side, make it easier for small businesses to apply. So I think it's both and. I think we can walk and chew gum at the same time. I think we can work on our systemic criteria for small businesses to apply, but also work with our small businesses to help them get those grants, because a lot of the grants that were allocated out, unfortunately, were not received by our communities of color and by our businesses led by businesses of color. So I think we have a lot of work to do in that space, but I'm happy to work on continuing that effort in the interim.
Thank you.
I'll add just, again, the economic recovery depends on us being able to get folks rental assistance, making sure that we've expanded food assistance so that children don't go hungry, that we, when Senator Wilson was talking about our childcare system, making sure that folks who have historically have had those challenges, we can't amplify those challenges in the pandemic. We must work towards recovery. And as you probably heard me say over and over and over again, I'm not trying to go to a new normal. This is a time to create new possibilities and really get at the root causes of some of these challenges that we've known that have been with us for generations.
Thank you. And then Representative Taylor, this next question comes from Deborah and is in that same vein. And Deborah just asked, what is being done to solve the homeless crisis in our community? It's a multifaceted problem. And it sounds like you might have some things to say about that.
Yeah, a multifaceted problem is an understatement. First and foremost, we really need to look at the various aspects and root causes of homelessness. It could be everything from family disruption to loss of jobs, simply being evicted for no cause. Like having a just cause eviction will keep people housed much longer, much safer, and keeps our communities more stable. Having ways for folks who are behind in rent to negotiate that. And a lot of times folks just need assistance from attorneys so that they know what their rights and obligations are, but also to ensure that, again, the investment, the $1 billion investment we're putting back into community, that it's protected and ensuring that we are keeping communities safe. In addition to that, there are other aspects of the homelessness challenge, not just folks who are being evicted, but there are folks who have been on the margins and have not been able to access resources. So what do we do about our brothers and sisters who are returning home from incarceration, making sure that we have reentry services? What do we do about folks who are plagued by challenges around mental health and substance use disorder, and being unhoused has been a symptom of a larger challenge. And so looking at comprehensive solutions and truly providing resources that are designed by communities for communities within the response to Blake will be helpful to address some of the root causes or the impacts that are manifested in our unhoused challenge issues. And again, like the most significant thing that we've really addressed in this one legislative session, remember, we can't undo generations of racism. We can't undo generations of policy that has really hurt folks who have been unable to keep up with the cost, the high cost of living in Western Washington in particular. Can't all undo that in one legislative session, but we certainly can prioritize helping those who have been on the margins, and making sure that it doesn't become a top-down system where you're only helping the rich fat cats get bigger tax breaks, when really, when you help folks who are the salt of the earth, the supportive community, we have stronger communities in that way.
I would also add that I see this as a public health issue. And what oftentimes individuals forget is in 2008, we had a recession, and the legislature made dramatic cuts in all of our safety net programs and all those things that traditionally were seen as public health services and supports. And so we fast forward to not only 2020, but the pandemic. And what we've seen is the outcome of that recession and the austerity budget that we passed. And I think that, along with just what we know about the inequities that exist and have existed in our institutions of government and in our institutions of education, that we also know representation matters. And we were able to make some changes because people whose lived experience was speaking on the floor was able to make the changes I think that we needed to make. But $59 billion in investments in the public health process and also in childcare, because you cannot expect people to fix themselves. And I would say, before we say all people don't want to have help, what I would say is, first we need to house people, and then we need to offer help, because safety comes first and then the security comes after that. And the other piece I think it's critically important that Rep. Taylor spoke to was this issue around incarceration. And incarceration is for a period of time. And then individuals leave incarceration. Everyone, the majority of people leave incarceration. And we have not done our diligence in supporting those individuals. When you leave them on a street corner with $20 in their pocket, and 2 to 3 to 4 days before anyone knows that they're out or has found them, to restart the services and supports they were getting inside. So a lot of work around reentry services, not only for the jail system, but also for DOC, as individuals re-enter communities so they can be the successful members of the community they so want to be.
Thank you. We have a bunch of questions coming in, and this one is from Kellen. Kellen says, as a student this year, I have admired your work on behalf of youth, including your great help with the Legislative Youth Advisory Council, Senator Wilson. During the interim, what projects are you working on for youth next session? And Senator Wilson, if you'd like to start, and then if others want to chime in on interim work regarding youth.
Well, I think youth voice is critical. And anytime you sit on a committee that serves early learning in K-12, you are remiss if youth are not at the focus of your work, but also at the table leading the way. And the Legislative Youth Advisory Council is part of a group that the governor appoints, and they, as a matter of fact, advise him in matters of policy and legislation. And they're representative of students across the state. And Kellen, as a matter of fact, was a group this year that, for the first time in 10 years, passed legislation to make sure that scholars all across our state had access to mental health services and supports via access on websites and through all the social media links that districts use, to make sure that their fellow scholars were safe and secure given the pandemic and given what they know they've experienced themselves and they've heard from others. So what I do is look to be invited into those rooms, and not to drive the legislation, but to listen to the ideas of scholars that say to me, here's where we need to make the changes. The menstrual equity was another piece of legislation passed by scholars this year, where materials and products will be available free of charge for all students in our public schools, our private schools, and our higher ed institutions. And also really thinking about working, I know, with a group of students who are concerned about the graduation requirements, as well as some changes in attendance. And so those things percolate up, and I'm looking forward to continuing my ongoing conversations to make sure, again, that student voice is centered and that we are addressing their needs, not systems needs. So thanks for the question, Kellen.
I want to briefly thank Kellen for chiming in and also engaging in this process. And Senator Wilson, thank you for your response, because you're doing a great job with that work as well. I know that this year has been, to put it lightly, extremely difficult for our young people. They've missed out on a lot, haven't been able to be in a structured classroom, which has hurt a lot of our students tremendously. Helped some, but hurt some of our students. It's been a year without sports and clubs and community programs. So I think we really need to focus on expanding the access to programs for our young people this year. As I mentioned about the trade school program, aside from that, we do have some funding coming in this year to work with our Black, Indigenous, and people of color youth serving organizations to help them capacity build, and also some funding to look at a one-stop resource center for our youth in the 30th. So stay tuned for that, Kellen, and definitely want to have youth voice in what that designing process looks like from a city perspective and from a district perspective. I'll also say I'll be working a lot with our juvenile justice and juvenile legal system folks at the state level to address reentry for our young people coming out of the juvenile system. How do they transition back into society? How do they get housing, education, jobs, and so on? And so there's a lot of work in that space so that we can get our young people back on track. But I would just say thank you, Kellen, again for your engagement.
And what I would add is that I am open. As a newest lawmaker, I haven't set all of how I want to engage with the community. And I think it's an opportunity for you to say, hey, I have an idea. And so please reach out to my office, Kellen. And you know, obviously there are opportunities for volunteers. Just because it may not have been done by another lawmaker in the way that I might think of it, having youth policy teams on specific topics is really interesting to me. So if we have a youth team that's very much interested in career and technical colleges, if we have a youth team that's very interested in housing or other topics, I would love to see how you all come up with policies and we work together, because I've found that some of the smartest people in the room are not the lawmakers, not even the folks with degrees, are the young people with the ideas of how they want their future to be. And so it's for me to make sure that that voice comes to the table and to get out of the way. So my hope is that we can find ways to engage together this summer. I'm emerging out of hibernation, if you will, and I would love to meet perhaps outside, and we have like an outdoor summit for kids who are interested in talking policy. Maybe there's a place called Camp Kilworth, that Senator Wilson might know about. You want to tell us a little bit about what you did there?
Well, and I just want to say it adds to a couple places, but, Rep. Johnson talked about how important apprenticeships and how important other things were. We have this incredible thing called a shoreline. And we also have the Maritime High School that Rep. Johnson was really actively engaged in beginning. And although that's a little north, it still encompasses and includes our young people. But it's also important, I think, to keep spaces and to create new spaces. And so we were able to get over $1 million and work with the Y, Seattle King County Y, to purchase the Camp Kilworth property, which is the old Boy Scout camp. And we'll be working with them to create an outdoor environmental ed center. And so as we think about this, is a sweet spot between the Port of Tacoma and the Port of Seattle. We have restoration for salmon going on. We have work in our tribe with our tribal nations going on. We have construction you've heard about. We have all kinds of things that we need to create the opportunities here. And those, I believe, start with providing opportunities for our young people so that they can think about living, growing, and thriving and staying perhaps in this community. So really looking forward to our ongoing work together for all youth and really all members of our community.
Thank you. We have a question from Julie. Julie asks, as citizens, do we need to be taking action to protect voting rights in our state? And I know that there have been some bills introduced nationally that popped up in our state legislature, but I'm not sure they got any hearings. Does anyone have interest in talking about protecting voting rights in Washington state?
We should always be thinking about protecting voting rights, whether we are at the forefront of legislation that is, negatively impacting community or positively impacting. We should always protect. And I think this year we passed legislation that would automatically restore rights for folks who have felony convictions. And so that, again, gets us in the forefront of expanding voter rights access to our members of the community. More voices in our government is better for all of us. And I think there's more work to be done. Looking at how Seattle has the voucher program for how money is in the political system, that could possibly be expanded to other jurisdictions so that we have more folks who can run for office, but not worry so much about the fundraising. We won't talk about that in this setting. But also there's other modes of voting. Ranked choice voting is another conversation that we've had. I believe a bill was introduced or will be introduced in the next biennium. And at the end of the day, we need to continue to look at how our voting system and voting rights is as inclusive as it possibly can be. So at the end of the day, we always must always protect voting rights access. And just because we're in Washington state where it hasn't been a primary conversation doesn't mean that it can't be attacked from unknown forces until it really negatively impacts community. So we should be always aware of that, always aware.
Thank you. We have a question from Allison, and Allison asks, will the lawmakers have in-person offices this year? How can we reach them from now until January? And I will go ahead and just answer part of that question, take a little moderator prerogative, and say that the lawmakers' contact information will be up on the screen after the end of this event. So that will give you phone numbers and email addresses and encourage you to stick around and write those down. And then as for in-person offices, I'll let the lawmakers speak to this because I know it's different.
Well, we did have a space, the three of us together. Really, we never all three were actually together, although we did have a space for the delegation, which we did give away, if you will, and did not release because of the pandemic. And I think as a legislative group, we haven't had that conversation, but I am, one that loves to be in my community. And as much as an office might be a good thing, I think one of the things we learned is that there are many ways to connect with individuals. And so for me, just as I think Rep. Taylor said, the world is opening up. And as we think about sitting outside and being together, happy to begin to start to connect with people in that way, but always, and will continue to be always available via email to set up a time that does not just work for me, but also works for you, regard to any kind of question or concern. So it does not just have to be an email. I would love to have more conversation. If there's questions I know people may have asked, we are not going to have time to answer. But again, would love to meet folks in the community that we live in spaces and places that support our local businesses. And right now, I think, I don't speak for the other two, but I think we haven't talked about going back to a brick and mortar space. I don't know if that is what we want to do.
I would just add too, for me, I would definitely love to meet whoever would like to meet. Obviously, we can do phone, Zoom, although we're probably zoomed out by this time. But would love to meet at a local coffee shop and talk about the issues. One thing I definitely learned this year is the power of collaboration in the bills that we passed. Every single bill that we worked on was worked on with community members, and it's super important because that's how we transform the system into one that benefits everyone. And this is the work that we will carry forward as a delegation throughout the interim and into next session. So excited to meet with you.
And lastly, what I would add is that I believe the administrative office of the legislature still has our staff on a work from home. And so it really wouldn't make sense for us to spend money on an office for which we cannot use, our staff cannot use. So, so we're just going to be creative about how we get back into community and just reach out.
Thank you. I've got a question here that might, I think maybe you all will know the answer to if you'll be able to participate. This is from Mimi with El Centro de la Raza, who says that students with our after-school program, and it looks like they have about 10 middle school students now, have been wondering if you'd be down to join us for a game of Among Us. Now, I don't know if folks are familiar with Among Us. It's a video game that has been made very popular recently. But Mimi and the middle schoolers at El Centro would like to know, are you interested?
I'm down if you give me a tutorial. Totally.
I don't want to lose badly, but I'll play. I'll
play.
I think the last video game I may have played was Halo, so I might need a tutorial as well.
Me
so.
too.
What's Halo?
That makes me feel that makes me feel a whole bunch better, Rep Johnson, when you say you need a tutorial.
I know, right?
So.
Yeah, it's been a while.
Y'all don't remember Tetris?
Awesome. That'd be awesome.
How about Dungeons and Dragons? That would be a little easier. Wait, I haven't played that either, but
we'll go ahead and move on to another question. And Mimi, you should definitely reach out to the legislators after this call. This question is from Rachel, and Rachel asks, this is very specific. Who should I contact to advocate for installing sidewalks on streets in my community, specifically 356th between First Ave and Pack Highway, to provide a safer walking connection between transit options? And Senator Wilson, I think that you are familiar with some of the work done in the transportation budget in this realm.
Rachel, let's chat more. There are funds within transportation budget, and I sit on transportation for the Senate, and Rep Taylor sits on transportation for the House, and it's called Safe Routes to School. And I think one of the things that's critically important for all of us is the sense of community, and to have a walkable community and a safe community. And so have been keeping my eye open for those funds, and staff are keeping their eyes open as well. But what I would suggest is to first reach out to the city to make sure that they are aware of the situation and the want. And then my hope would be that we can work together with the city to prioritize that area, if it's not already marked for a need, to perhaps this next legislative session, see what we can do. And where else perhaps in the district do we need to focus on safe routes for not only young people, but anyone who are pedestrians and walking in our community. So would love to reach out more, but there are particular funds available for those things, and would love to focus more on that with you.
Thank you. Let's see here. We have a question that came in from Tamara. And this question is asks, when is the Washington State Legislature planning to make Comcast and similar companies be treated as utilities? Representative Johnson, would you like to take that question?
Sure, great question. So one of the two major bills we passed this year was the Public Broadband Act, and this is a very important piece of legislation. As we know, in addition to the economic consequences, COVID has exacerbated a crisis in digital access from everything in our public life, online learning, employment, obviously our work, and accessing resources like housing, food, and healthcare. And so the Public Broadband Act will employ or deploy public utility districts and other local government entities to provide retail telecommunication services. And so across our state, there's so many people that do not have this access to broadband internet, which we sometimes take for granted. And this will now make sure that public utility districts will be able to step up and serve areas that private telecoms won't. And good high-speed internet will support our remote work as we transition to hybrid work and learning, and keep our families connected as well, and allow our public health clinics to better serve their communities. So the Public Broadband Act is very important for our state. It's one of the most important pieces of legislation we passed this year, and just so excited to see it pass.
Thank you. Okay, we have another question here. This one, I think, Representative Taylor, you had a bill that is actually kind of in this vein. The question is, the pandemic has shown us that there is a healthcare worker shortage. What is being done to find and train more workers? And I think maybe your first bill is related to this in some way.
Yes, House Bill 1383, the respiratory therapist care bill, which expands and addresses the respiratory care therapist and the licensure, so that we have more folks who can help you with your lungs and cardio. These are all big words that the healthcare committee helped me pull together. But it was really important. As a child of my mother has COPD, and knowing that respiratory care therapists are available in our regional communities, so she doesn't have to go all the way to Seattle to get those services. So we want to make sure that we have the kinds of staff and individuals who can respond to the long-term issues related to not only COVID, but all of our healthcare issues, and making sure that folks come from communities that are reflective of the communities that they want to serve. House Bill 1425 is very similar in expanding scholarships for career and technical colleges students, in particular around the healthcare industry, as well as the STEM industries. And so in essentially making sure that students who are in especially rural and suburban communities can access the resources in their community, and then come back to the community to serve in professions that we desperately need. We have a brain drain that comes out of Federal Way, 30th District, that ends up having folks, moving into other areas, not only in the big city of Seattle, but also outside of our state. And so how do we get folks to stay or return to our communities and in an affordable way? So making sure that we provide as many resources for folks to get education, to fill the healthcare needs that we have in our particular communities, and to look at ways to build up our workforce and the resources that our workforce needs in comprehensive ways. So I'm looking forward to continuing that dialogue into the next legislative session and find more resources to support suburban and rural areas.
And I just wanted to add, this is another area where it's been, again, traditionally institutions of privilege that have done these kinds of things. And so the other piece, I think, of this that's so critically important was our work and equity around our legislation, and particularly around our K-12 system, our higher ed system, and also our medical community, and making sure that those individuals who are in fact teaching our future healthcare professionals and our future higher ed professors and our future teachers are as well versed in issues of privilege and institutional racism, so that we're not either perpetuating what currently exists, or we are continuing to put barriers in the way from making sure that individuals represent communities that they serve. And I just think those are really critically important pieces. And then also just Representative Johnson spoke to the Career Connect Washington and mastery-based learning, and how we make sure we're starting early on and helping young people think about all the things they may not even know might be available to them as a future thought about their future work, and where their passion and their purpose might meet. So I think all of these things together will increase that.
Don't forget the folks who are having a career pivot. I mean, the pandemic, we're seeing
yes.
people who are not returning to prior industries, and they're making changes in their lives. And so Claire, Senator Wilson, and Representative Johnson have been pivotal around legislation that will help folks who are making that career pivot. And there's so many people who, start in one career or have jobs, don't know what they want to do at 19, 20, 31, and they make a change in their mid 30s. I mean, I like all ways and all things. And so we want to have the ideas of opportunity come to you whenever it does.
Thank you. This next question is one we touched on a little, but I think is worth asking again. This is from Sam. And Sam asks, when is the emergency over? I know the governor said we reopen on June 30th, but will things be okay by then? What happens if things get worse or variants start increasing hospitalizations? And Senator Wilson, you talked a little bit about the work that needs to be done on vaccination, but maybe you can take that one.
Well, I just think, again, from a public health perspective, I trust our profession, and I trust science, and I trust data. And I am a true believer in, vaccination myself. And when indoors, I probably myself will continue to remain masked. And I think we need to keep track of our numbers. And I think we just need to watch and see how things are moving forward. And, we don't know what we don't know. What I did hear was that the vaccination itself, when they were talking about whether boosters would be needed, is much stronger than initially they thought. And so I just believe we continue to move forward. It's kind of like universal precautions, just like you always wash your hands because you just never know when. So I would profess that, individuals have to do what they need to do to make sure they feel safe. But I would hope that individuals would consider, if they can, to be vaccinated, and would also consider to wear masks when they were indoors. And again, we continue to reach out to our populations to make sure that they understand about the vaccinations, and we make those things accessible in communities where individuals live.
Thank you. Well, unfortunately, we are about out of time, and that will have to be our last question. Thank you, everyone who participated in our virtual town hall. I'm going to now turn it over back to the legislators for closing remarks. Senator Wilson, would you like to go first, and then we'll hear from Representatives Johnson and Taylor in that order?
Well, I just want to thank so much the constituents of the 30th and participation, and I know communication. And I also hope you felt like when individuals were dealing with issues related to employment security, which didn't come up tonight, that you felt as if as a team where we were trying to be as responsive as we could to elevate the support for individuals. And I also just want to thank the input that individuals give anytime there's legislation that comes forward. It is about representing, and it's also about representing the greatest number of individuals that we can in the legislation that we're working on. And so again, I just hope individuals know that doors are always open, emails are always open, and love to meet with individuals for. That's where the answers to problems come, is in the conversation. And I am incredibly appreciative with my partners, Rep. Taylor and Rep. Johnson, because together the three of us, I think, can make huge movement, not only for our community here, but also for individuals across the state of Washington. So thanks for being with us tonight.
And I will just say, I mean, I am so excited that, you know, our community is bouncing back from COVID. And I think Rep. Taylor said it best earlier when we said, you know, we don't want to have or go back to what we had before, but go on to more opportunities and more resources and just a thriving community. I can almost guarantee that we're all experiencing some level of struggle in the past year, from the global health pandemic, the economic uncertainty, online learning, and there's been a lot of division along racial, socioeconomic, and political lines. And we approached the session knowing that, and we decided that we were going to address COVID, economic recovery, and police accountability, and so many other pressing issues. And I believe we did that. But by no means was that enough. I think we have a lot more work to do, as evident across our state, and constituents are asking for partnership and collaboration and getting that work done. And I'm hopeful that we're going to be able to do it, and it's going to take us all coming together again and working on these issues. And so, you know, just thank you to everyone that weighed in this evening. Sorry we didn't get to all the questions. Hopefully we will be able to answer all your questions by email or phone or Zoom, and we'll keep the work going.
This has been an amazing session. Certainly hit the ground running, but had the mentorship and the peer relationship with Senator Wilson and Representative Johnson. They are leaders among leaders in the legislature. And so to know that the 30th District and to be able to be a part of this team is phenomenal, and what we're about to do for our communities. I thank you all for your patience and your persistence with me in my office as we are learning. We're building that plane as we fly it kind of thing. And what I'm very much interested in is continuing to listen as new issues emerge. As we are, you know, we might be celebrating some successes, but some folks are still in the middle of their crises. And we still need to listen and find solutions for communities, and not just shift the responsibility from the legislatures to local leaders, but work in concert with leaders who are elected and in community and designated by their family. And so I'm looking forward to the collaboration and coordination, not only with you and my colleagues, but to finding the very best for our community and showing that the 30th District is the absolute best district in the whole state of Washington.
Thank you. That's all the time we have this evening. Thank you all for attending tonight's event. If we did not get to your question, you can contact members' offices directly via email or phone on the screen that pops up next. Have a great rest of your week.